Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a win for Donald Trump.
Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, announcing they are changing their policies to focus on free speech.
So why is big tech bowing down to the incoming U.S. president? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
My name is Paris Marx. I host the Tech Won't Save Us podcast, and I also write a lot about the tech industry from a critical perspective.
Paris, welcome back to The Take. It's always good to have you. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg dropped some pretty big news recently on January 7th. Let me play a little snippet.
We're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
It's been criticized by people who see this as yet another example of big tech aligning itself with the incoming president, Donald Trump. It's safe to say that you are one of those critics, though, because on X last week, you called Facebook a, quote, social cancer, and said the days of Mark Zuckerberg shaping discourse and controlling communication must end. So tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, you can see I'm a big supporter, right? Yeah. I think there's two things here, right? I think on the one hand, you have this decision by Mark Zuckerberg around the fact checking that is not a big surprise. We've seen Elon Musk's X, go in this direction already. But of course, we've seen a number of other social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram through the election, already begin to pull back on moderation, already begin to pull back on some of the policies that they had implemented in the past. So this further development is not a surprise. I think is something completely expected. It allows Meta or Facebook to cut costs on moderation, but it also allows it to align more with the Trump administration, with what Republican politicians want to see from social media platforms to make sure that, conservative voices are not being silenced, which is, something that they're very focused on. And I think the bigger point around the social cancer aspect of it is just looking at this platform more broadly that has been around for about 2 decades now, I would say. But it does feel like, especially in the past few years, as the company has been more and more trying to get more ad profits out of it and to increase engagement, that the quality of the platform has been further degrading. And as a result of that, there has been more conspiracy theories spreading, and as a result, that affects the broader conversation that we have, the broader kind of understanding of facts and information, because if so many people are interacting with these things on Facebook that are completely false, that are made up, then that has an effect on, how a lot of people start to see the world, that has broader consequences.
Yeah, it does. So, Paris, I appreciate that your answer there was very measured, but your tweet itself, social cancer, there's passion behind that.
Oh, yeah.
Where is that passion coming from? Why are you so, safe to say, angry?
Yeah, I think it's a growing frustration with these platforms, right? I'm a critic of the tech industry and these platforms, but I think that it's more and more obvious that these things are having a negative impact on our societies. If we think about just before, Christmas, just before the holidays, there was this whole media cycle that was picked up by mainstream media that was talking about these drones that were in the sky in the United States and what was happening there. And this was all this big hysteria that was created on social media.
Where's the other guys? Oh, here's the other one, right over the library. They're just pacing back and forth, going very slow.
People thought that there were all these drones in the sky, that they were surveilling people and all this kind of stuff. And, people sharing photos of airplanes and of stars right. and things like that and saying, look, it's more drones. And, the response was not to say, hold on a minute, you're not dealing with the facts here. It was to say, yeah, we need to believe that this is a real thing. We need to pick up on it. And that's not to say that this story in particular is the worst thing ever or something, but I see it as emblematic of this broader trend that is happening with these platforms where you have all of this AI generated, imagery and information that is spreading around that is just designed to get engagement, make sure that people are seeing ads. And, I think it just plays into this broader issue where it feels like as, mainstream media, traditional media gets further degraded, has its funding cut, has journalists losing their jobs, and we move toward this environment where it's not just that we're on social media platforms, but we're on social media platforms that are designed for engagement, are designed for maximizing ad profits, and seem to have less and less of an incentive to really care about the broader social impacts of this, that it does erode this social fiber. And it does feel like, listen, there's all this talk about the decline of the West and, the decline of the United States and all this kind of stuff. And it feels like if this is the media environment that we have, right, if this is where people get their information, it's inevitable that a decline is going to happen, or maybe it's emblematic of a society already in decline, because that is not how you, have a country that's strong, have a people that are well informed, that can actually participate well in a democracy. It's completely destroying the social fabric.
Yeah, there's that passion.
Yeah.
Because also facts, what are those? Who needs them?
Right, exactly.
So speaking of misinformation, that is sort of what the other side says moves like Zuckerberg's are aimed at. So in his announcement, Zuckerberg makes specific references to the election, to Trump, and to freedom of speech in the way that Trump often talks about it. He's also critical of legacy media's focus on misinformation. In the past, Zuckerberg has been less pointed about policy changes like this. How significant is this?
I think it's notable because, yes, we have seen in the past Facebook take decisions that were aimed at addressing criticisms that it received for its content moderation policies, right? In particular, after the 2016 election of Donald Trump and even the 2015 Brexit campaign, there were accusations that, Facebook played a role in swaying those votes and the decisions of them. I think that is a bit more contested today, whether that actually happened, but it's impossible to deny that was a key part of the narrative and created this push for a company like Facebook to take actions that were designed to try to address these things. And especially after, the pandemic happened and after January 6th, attempted seizing of the Capitol in the United States, there was also this broader push to crack down on, extreme right-wing users that were trying to organize these sorts of things and to crack down on vaccine misinformation and all this sort of stuff, right? And this in particular created a lot of anger on the right because, they saw greater enforcement against right-wing users who were posting this kind of content. And you saw this growing push to want to push back against that, right? They did not want to see their accounts suspended. They did not want to see their posts being taken down, regardless if it involved, hate speech and forms of, organizing, extreme right-wing demonstrations and things like that, right? So, you have that kind of environment where, especially under the Biden administration, there was a growing push to try to regulate the tech companies, to try to, make something happen there, and a growing anger on the part of conservatives or the right around, how they felt that they were not allowed to say what they wanted to on these sorts of platforms. And so with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, we saw, him basically remove all of those restrictions. And now that Trump is back in power, I don't think it's a surprise to see that Zuckerberg is, doing the same sort of a thing. But then on top of that, there is this other piece of it where I think that in the past, Zuckerberg was just trying to address the criticism leveled against the company so that it could continue to serve shareholders and do what it wanted to do. And this time I do feel like Zuckerberg is more kind of personally aligned with those views in a way that he might not have been in the past because of how his own politics have evolved too.
Oh, wow. Well, speaking of the past, we know that there is history here. In 2021, Zuckerberg actually banned Trump from Facebook because of his role in the January 6th attacks in the US. This feels like such an about face, but is it because of what you're saying that Zuckerberg's own views have shifted?
But I think more and more we can see, like we've seen with Elon Musk's Twitter and X, that this is just a broader movement where the power and the influence of the right has risen in society. They have retaken the reins of power. And so that means that these companies, they want to maximize their profits. They do not want to be held accountable for the things that they're doing. They do not want to be dragged in front of Congress and questioned. And they can see that under this new administration, the people who want to ensure that conservatives can say whatever they want online are going to be even further empowered. And so they're taking actions ahead of time to make sure that that is not going to be a problem for them, but also to show Donald Trump that, look, yes, we're on your side. We are going to take actions that are in your favor, because they also hope to get something on the other side of that too.
After the break, more with Paris. Okay, so we know that it is not just Mark Zuckerberg. Ex-CEO Elon Musk's bromance of sorts with Donald Trump has been well documented.
America's just not just going to be great. America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing.
Other big tech leaders like Apple's Tim Cook, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, as well as Zuckerberg, have donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. So you were talking about how Zuckerberg fits into this broader trend of Silicon Valley rolling out the red carpet for Trump. But I wonder specifically, what will that mean for the next 4 years for big tech, but then for those of us who use big tech?
Yeah, it's bad news, I think. It's not surprising, right? These are some of the most powerful and richest people in the world. And they have reached a point where they're starting to see their companies and themselves come under scrutiny for actions that they have taken and for harms that they have caused as a result of their corporate actions. And we saw under the Biden administration that some of these things started to pick up. There was talk of increasing capital gains taxes, or, certain forms of capital gains taxes. There were the antitrust investigations against major tech companies with the threat of, say, breaking them up or restricting how they acted, and the possibility of new regulations, whether in the United States, but even more beyond the United States, right? We've seen Europe, Australia, Brazil, other countries move forward with harsher tech regulations against these American companies and American platforms. And so I think it's not a surprise that people who become very rich and very powerful are going to align themselves with the right, especially, a right that says, hey, if you, come on our side, we're not going to regulate you. We're not going to tax you even more. We're going to help try to serve your interests. Back in 2016, tech figures like Peter Thiel were supporting Donald Trump, but there were a lot of people who were not, right? Who did not want to see him elected. This time around, he has a lot more support. The tech people are in his inner circle. As you were saying, there's this bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, such that Elon Musk now gets referred to as the first buddy. We don't really know what happened to JD Vance, where he's disappeared to. But so all of these tech billionaires are seeing their opportunity, and they're going to seize it to try to protect their interests, but also because I think we've seen them move more socially conservative over the years, right? There has been reporting that suggests that Mark Zuckerberg was not happy that because he did some philanthropy to progressive causes and didn't get a ton of praise for it in the past, that this has made him really angry. And of course, we know that Elon Musk, has done a notable shift toward a more socially conservative worldview, especially since his daughter came out as transgender, and he has completely rejected her. These are people who did present themselves as more liberal, more progressive in the past during the Obama era. It was beneficial to them then, but now they are seizing this Trump moment to ensure that it is going to serve their interests. And I think that is going to be of significant impact to all of us, because we know that these companies have moved fast and broken things in our societies. And essentially what this means is that they're going to be able to continue doing that and to, use their power as they see fit.
Oh, wow. Paris, as a layperson, a person who uses this big tech, it really just sounds remarkable that some of this is coming from personal individual slights that then causes this major shift in worldview, but then has a domino effect. You mentioned 2016.
One of the big things that Elon Musk didn't like about Joe Biden that really turned him against him was that Joe Biden slighted him with the EV stuff. Joe Biden didn't like that Tesla as a company is not unionized. And so he went to GM to promote their EVs as, one of the companies
future.
that is moving us forward, that is developing these future cars instead of Tesla. And reportedly that really angered Elon Musk and was, one of many reasons that he wanted nothing to do with Joe Biden.
Yeah. I want to follow up, though, because you mentioned 2016 and Peter Thiel. And so we did see people who said, OK, I'm no longer going to use a platform like PayPal, which he was aligned with because of his views. But I just don't think we're seeing that right now. People are not throwing out their iPhones or their Facebook accounts necessarily, are they?
I don't think so. Even just ahead of the election, when the Washington Post, announced it wasn't going to run its endorsement of Kamala Harris, allegedly because of pressure from the owner, Jeff Bezos. Some people canceled their Washington Post subscriptions, but I would imagine many fewer canceled their Amazon Prime subscriptions, right? And people have left Twitter or X, but a lot of them went to Threads, which is owned by Meta and, controlled by Mark Zuckerberg, right? So it's really hard to make the ethical choice when we're all dependent on all of these platforms. That's not to say that, when we can make that choice, when we can avoid some of them, that we shouldn't try to. But I think that becomes a difficult thing to do, because even when we try to avoid these companies, they are everywhere, especially when we don't notice them, right? So much of the web is hosted on Google or Amazon or Microsoft servers, and we don't even see that when we interact with those websites. They are really everywhere, and the individual pushback to these companies is very difficult, right? It needs to be a structural, force to try to force them to do something different. And I feel like we saw that in Zuckerberg's video as well, because among the things that he said, was that Meta and himself will be working closely with the Trump administration to also stop the censorship that is coming from other governments. And of course, censorship in this meaning, sure he's referring to free speech, but he also means these tech regulations that are coming for social media companies and American tech companies more broadly. And we've not only seen Mark Zuckerberg talk about this, but Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, has been very vocal that he is talking to the Trump administration. He wants to ensure that the Trump administration helps them ensure that the European Union is not going to regulate American tech companies as much. So they are planning not just to, use the Trump administration to get their own way within the United States, but to then use the leverage of the American government to try to make sure that American tech is not regulated or reined in other parts of the world as well.
So going back to Meta, let's say, most of their users are outside of the United States. How do you think that we'll see the impact of the moves we talked about earlier play out around the world?
It's a serious impact, right? Because so much of Meta's policymaking is based on things that happen in the United States and American political pressures and American ideas about what free speech should be and all of these sorts of things, right? And then those policies, those decisions get pushed out globally, regardless of whether they make sense in all of these different markets and parts of the world, right? And that's part of the reason why we've seen more governments be more interested in social media regulation, in what is happening on these social media platforms, and in tech regulation more broadly, because they see the harmful impacts of these platforms and these companies, in their domestic sphere. But there's also the piece of it too, where they are not really benefiting from these things, and they see that the companies are not willing to be held accountable, or not really paying attention to the domestic concerns that exist, because someone like Mark Zuckerberg is more concerned about what's happening in the United States than what's happening in Australia or the UK or Brazil or anywhere else. We were talking earlier about conspiracy theories and misinformation spreading. That can be a big problem in many other parts of the world as well. That can have very serious consequences in people's lives. We've seen the reporting in the past about how Facebook contributed to a genocide in Myanmar, but there has been reporting about impacts it's had in Ethiopia and many other countries around the world. And so this is a very serious impact. So now that, Meta is making this policy in response to the election of Donald Trump in the United States, to basically say, that bit of moderation we were doing, we're not even going to engage in anymore. That certainly will have impacts on the conversations that happen in the United States and what happens on the platform there. But it also means in all these other parts of the world, the company really doesn't care anymore, right? And whatever people are posting, whatever kind of inflammatory things, discriminatory things people are posting is just going to be like carte blanche, right? They can do whatever they want. because these platforms and these CEOs really do not care about the impacts of their companies on our societies outside the United States. And so, we need to be acting to, ensure that they don't have these social harms that we're already seeing.
Paris Marx, host of the very appropriately named Tech Won't Save Us, very prescient for this conversation. Thank you so much for letting us in on what's in store. I appreciate it, even though I'm a little scared.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
And that's The Take. If you want to catch more episodes like this, make sure you're following our YouTube playlist. That's where you'll find all of our recent content updated regularly so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you stay in the loop with all things Al Jazeera English. We'll see you tomorrow.